Hi, I'm Kip Parker.
And I'm Charlie Parker.
And we're the Parker Brothers. Hey, Charlie, what's missing from our game catalog?
I don't know, Kip, tell me.
Well, you can't talk to the dead.
You sure as hell can.
That's why we got this brand new game called Ouija.
Well, Ouija, Kip, tell me about it.
Well, inside the package comes a flat board with all the letters of the alphabet, numbers from 0 to 9, and a yes-no written out by itself.
Well, that sounds like a lot of stuff going on.
It's got a lot of stuff going on indeed, Charlie. It also comes with this planchette which hovers over the letters the dead are trying to tell you.
Well, how does that work, Chip?
Well, you ask the question, and then the dead move your hands in the direction of the answers.
What did he do to make this house so evil?
Murder, vampirism, cannibalism, drug addiction, alcoholism, sadism, mutilation.
How did it end?
If it had ended, we would not be here.
Hey, welcome to episode 2 of Moviefreak. Today we're going to be talking about some true ghost stories that we've all experienced, and then we're going to talk a little bit about haunted house movies that we love. I'm Ben Hodson.
I'm Kelby Lenormand.
And I'm Sean Smithson. Yay, haunted house movies. I love ghosts. As long as they're kept on film. The real life experiences of weirdness, though, I can do without at this point. And in that regard, I think we all have a couple of our own. Kelby, creep us out.
Sure, I can do that for you. When we first moved back in, I think it was like 2002, 2003, when we moved from Oklahoma to California, we moved into a house in Downey, which is Southern California, and that house was haunted. I was about to swear, sorry. I was about to say haunted as bleep, but we first realized that there was stuff going on when I was in my room, and I caught something in the reflection of my computer screen, and it was a shadow sitting on my bed, and it got up and walked out of the room. And at first I thought it was like my mom or my sisters, because, you know, my door was open, they could have wandered in, but everybody was in the living room. So that was the beginning of, like, the phenomena. And it just got weirder and weirder after that. Like, I was having lots of nightmares and hardly sleeping through the night, and they were never recurring nightmares, but they were all very, very violent and very detailed nightmares. And there was also a girl in a flowery dress who liked to run up and down the hall a lot, and she looked like she was the same age as my youngest sister. So I was always blaming it on Nicole, thinking that Nicole was just running up and down the hall. And the scariest incident, though, was the day I got chased into my room by something that did not like me being there. I was home alone. I was in the kitchen making tea, and this shape just walked by the doorway of the kitchen. And I instantly felt panic. And so I rushed to my room, and I shut my door, and I just sit, and I wait. And I hear these angry footsteps just stomping up and down the hallway to my door, turning around, stomping back to my parents' door. They're just pacing like it was mad that it couldn't get into my room. And that went on for a good 10 minutes or so. Just sitting there listening to something stomp up the hallway. So that was terrifying. But I always thought that I was the only one experiencing it until years later. We haven't lived in that house for a very, very long time. My mom, out of nowhere, I think I was in college, she goes, "Do you remember when we were living in the house in Downey? And did you ever see the little girl in the blue dress?" And I was like, "I'm sorry. What now?" She's like, "She almost knocked me over one day when I was carrying laundry." I was like, "Oh, thank you, Mom. I'm glad that we're having this conversation now. I really would have liked to have had it when we were all living in the house. That way I knew I wasn't a crazy person."
Seriously.
Like, come on. My littlest sister, Nicole, she had seen some things too. And she was very receptive. She was one of those kids who just said weird things like you know how some kids have reincarnation type memories, and they'll say things like, "Oh, I remember when I was blah blah blah." She was that kid, And one night she wouldn't go to bed on her own, and my mom was like, Coley, you're big, you don't need to sleep with me, like, what's your deal? And she goes, 'cause I don't like seeing the hands. My mom goes, the what? And she goes, the hands in my room, they reach for me.
Did you ever experience, night terrors? It sounds like what you saw was shadow people. That's what the sort of the lore goes around, right? Where you wake up in the middle of the night and there's a shadow standing there and you can't speak or talk, but you see it and it's coming. Do you think that ever happened to you or anything like that?
No, because it wasn't a nighttime thing when I saw the shadows. It was a daytime thing, and I hadn't been sleeping.
That's just where people see them most often, but it sounds like, typically when you see shadows, that's what you're seeing. I don't know.
It never happened outside of that house. I haven't had that kind of experience since then. Yeah. And there was also the night where I felt like something laid down in the bed next to me. That was an interesting night, but that presence was actually okay. So that felt okay. I felt
Very
the bed.
Suspiria.
Yeah, well, but not in the scary witch way. But I didn't have nightmares after that incident, though. When I felt like something had laid next to me and was holding me, I stopped having nightmares after that.
Interesting.
Yep.
Yeah, it's like good or bad spirits that you were dealing with, different mentalities, and maybe that was a protector or something. Who knows?
That's what I liked it.
So, a couple things that have happened to me that now I guess I'm a little bit different, Sean. I don't necessarily hate getting scared. I kind of like it as long as I live, So far so good. But we had where I grew up, there was an old World War II air base that had been shut down that was sort of all, it's like something out of a movie. It was all overgrown with trees. Of course, this is a Seattle area. And it was behind my house a few miles, but we'd go back in the woods and go to this place, and we found a place where we could sneak under the fence and go in. And of course, it had been abandoned since the 40s or 50s. And there was one, it was all underground. I don't know if you guys know, but during World War II, it was a big concern that Seattle was going to be hit. One of the great places for the Japanese to land on the U.S. soil. So there's
even had internment camps there, right? For Japanese Americans.
Yep, same in Utah here. And so they have a lot of old bases up there that you can kind of, actually, great capture the flag, man. When you're a kid. But we went down, I took a friend that had never been there, never sneaked in before, and we went down and we found a place where you can actually climb down into the barracks, and you have to take a flashlight. It's pitch dark. We're in the middle of the night. We're going through, and we come to a room that I'd never been in before, and there was a big metal door, and we were able to, after a while, force it open and go inside, and we found it was the bathroom area. There's a bunch of toilets sort of side by side there, all dusty and old and broken down. It was just a simple square room with cement walls, nothing in there. And we started hearing something laughing and giggling and sort of all these noises, talking to themselves like crazy. So we immediately thought it was a homeless guy or something. We didn't think, but I don't know. You mentioned, Kelby, that sometimes you have this like a dark feeling when you met those presences or whatever. And I think that there's some people that have more of a sensitivity. I'm not saying I'm clairvoyant, but I definitely have a sensitivity to spirits because I know immediately, even before something happens, that something's wrong, And that feeling came on me really strong, and I shined my light in the whole room, and there was nothing in there. It was just empty, but there was a voice, speaking and talking to themselves. So, of course, we ran out, and I never went back to that specific area again.
Gee, you think?
Let's go spend the night there. We're going to run away for the night.
Why don't you go?
Okay. I was a little kid. I'd grown up, quote unquote, pretty damned haunted anyway. And my mom and I had moved from Baltimore to Chico. My mom was originally from California. So when we moved back to California, I met like all my cousins and all that stuff. And my cousins, Matt and Teddy, couple of upper Northern California semi-hick guys, no monster kid stuff going on or whatever. I had a Ouija board, and they were having a blast playing with it. They stayed with us for the week, and they were having a blast playing with it the first night, and they were getting it to work and accusing each other of moving the planchette and all that stuff. And that night, a white trash neighbor of ours had left her baby with her best friend, who never took it out of the crib. This woman had gone on vacation. The baby crawled out of the crib and died, like that night. We found out a few days later, but the next day, Matt and Teddy are playing with the Ouija board again, and it's really, really active. And then that night, we decided to have a seance.
For the baby?
No. We didn't know about the baby at that point. That came later. I'm just saying it kind of ties in and makes things a little extra weird. Their aunt had died of cancer or whatever, and she was older. And we were like, let's contact her. This will be fun. So we pulled out, I had a little school desk in my room that we pulled into the middle of my room. My mom is out in the living room with her friend Brian talking and drinking wine. And we've got the lights out in my room, and I'm playing the part of the medium and all this stuff and doing how I'd seen it done in the movies. And so we get to the point where we basically say, if there's something here, please, let us know. And on my mother's eyes, the candelabra we had in the middle of the desk started bouncing up into the air and slamming back down on the desk. So it wasn't just shaking around, it wasn't vibrating, there wasn't a train going by. The thing was jumping a few inches up in the air and hopping around the table, and the candle didn't go out. We were up so damn fast.
Yeah.
I can still remember the slowed down sense of time that I had as we all simultaneously dove for the light switch, and we went shoulder to shoulder, three of us, down our tiny apartment hallway, washed white. We were washed out, man. We were terrified, and my mom turned around and said, "What is going on?" My cousins have never messed around since then with that stuff. But and the question for me, though, is it internal or is it really external? Were we basically doing a focused energy kind of table tipping thing? Or was there something else at play?
That's a good question.
And I've come to the conclusion for myself, even with the many experiences I had growing up and well into my teen years, that it could be either one. I mean, because the mind is powerful, genetic memory is incredibly powerful. Also, who knows what happens when we die? It could be internal, it could be external. But regardless, something is going on, and it's frickin' weird, and it can be really, really scary.
Shut up. Shut up? Why, certainly. You don't think I'm the kind that would keep laughing. Some people never know when to stop.
God, it knows I'm here.
Look, I know the supernatural is something that isn't supposed to happen, but it does happen.
Now look, Doc, we're buddies, okay? But don't try to convert me.
I'm trying to prepare you. My name's Marquay, Dr. Marquay, a scientist interested in the supernatural. The unnatural, if you like. I came to Hill House to find the key to another world. Assisting me in this exploration of the unknown was Eleanor, Nell, who could look back into the past, and Theo, something of a witch, who could see into the future. This is Luke, who didn't believe in anything, until evil, patient and waiting, made him change his mind.
Stop it! God. God. Whose hand was I holding?
How many of us take seriously the things we cannot or do not want to understand, simply because we are afraid?
Eleanor, your fault! Did you hear me calling?
Oh, this house. You have to watch it every minute.
The Haunting was produced and directed by Robert Wise, brilliant producer of West Side Story. The stars consist of a cross-section of top talent in the world of entertainment. Julie Harris, Claire Bloom, Richard Johnson, Russ Tamblyn.
What does it take to convince you that the dead do not always rest in peace? That some houses, like Hill House, are born bad?
Well, let's get out of the real, quote unquote, and into the unreal, I hope. Ben, I know that you have the ghost and haunted house subgenre kind of bracketed, so why don't you lead the discussion? Where are we going to start?
Okay, so, I mean, basically to me, and when I talk about haunted house movies, I think of like three categories. There's sort of the house itself is the murderer, but, you know, the true haunted house itself. And then there's kind of this separate thing where the house possesses people, which is this weird subgenre, but there's actually quite a few movies in that. And then there's just more like there's ghosts in the house, which the house seems to be haunted, but then of course you find out later it's ghosts or some other thing that's causing that haunting. But one of the quintessential haunted house movies for me is actually The Legend of Hell House from 1973. And what I got to mention about this, I guess just to tell you what it's about, four consultants are hired by this guy to go into this house that's supposedly haunted and prove whether or not there is an afterlife or whatever. That's what this guy wants them to do. Three of them are more on the science side of things. One's clairvoyant, one's a scientist, paranormal scientist. But one guy is actually the only survivor of a previous group that went in and tried to solve.
That's Roddy McDowall's character, right?
Exactly. Which
the only movie he plays a cool guy in.
Yeah.
Like the Fonzie guy.
Well, I don't know. But Roddy McDowall, of course, you know him from Planet of the Apes as the main Cornelius ape, but in the classic Planet of the Apes. But he was also in a great vampire movie called Fright Night 1 and 2, which are one of my favorite vampire series, actually. And he sort of plays a Van Helsing in that movie.
Meets a monster show host, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That wants to be a wannabe Van Helsing. But the thing about The Legend of Hell House is it's super aggressive. It's written by Richard Matheson.
Yeah, and can I interject here real quick? Like you said, it's very scientific in its setup. Yeah, I think it's worth mentioning Matheson was very good at turning the occult and the supernatural into a science. How am I trying to say it? Into something more scientific. Great case in point. He wrote I Am Legend, the first novel to portray vampires as a disease. Is a scientific disease, and it slots in very well with Hell House. But anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
That's great. Yeah, Matheson, you also know not just I Am Legend, but he also wrote a lot of the greatest Twilight Zone episodes from the original series. Him and Rod Serling are like the kings of Twilight Zone episodes.
We're 20,000 feet, man, with the gremlin on the wing, baby.
Yep. William Shatner.
Something on the wing. Something on the wing. Sorry.
But back to Hell House.
So the other thing is it's directed by John, I think it's Howe or Hugh. Anyways, he made Watcher in the Woods, which is like the scariest Disney movie ever, you know?
Yeah, it is.
That and Something This Way Come.
And maybe parts of Darby O'Gill and the Little People when
Really?
the Phantom Carriage comes to take people's souls away. Terrifying.
I guess the Banshee, right? The Banshee.
Yeah.
When I think of that movie, I think of Sean Connery singing. You know,
yeah.
What the hell is?
Which is just as scary as the Banshee, but.
Anyway, so the reason I love this haunted house movie is because the house is literally terrifying, and there's a huge threat level. The house, of course, kills people, and even the most mundane things that happen. Get out of control fast. I mean, they're sitting at a dinner table and all the silverware starts attacking the people and stabbing them, and it's terrifying. And it looks real. It looks really well done even today.
Super rationally done.
Yeah.
And the scene with Pamela Franklin when she's trying to go to sleep, the young medium,
Oh my god.
Accosted by the entity who keeps ripping the bed sheets off and wanting to get at her. Yeah.
Well, yeah. So in the book, supposedly, I haven't read the book, but supposedly that's a really X-rated scene.
I've read the book, and it's simply titled Hell House for anybody who wants to find it. And it's one of 3 books that have scared me.
Yeah.
I'm kind of impervious to fear off the printed page. This scared the crap out of me.
Yeah. In the movie, the camera zooms right in on her face as the entity has its way with her, and there's, of course, massive pain is what she's showing in her character. But it's this weird. There's actually a lot of weird sexual overtones in that movie too. The other woman is sort of possessed by the house and starts coming on to everybody.
Yeah,
and
she becomes an nymphomaniac. Which, not to give too much away, but the third reel in the film and the twist at the end makes you know why that's all happening.
Yeah, the other thing I got to mention about Legend of Hell House is it's super influential on The Shining. Down to a lot of moments in there have a very similar vibe, and actually in between each scene is a title card that shows you the date and time in a very clinical, scientific way, very much like Kubrick in the Wednesday, Thursday, countdown as The Shining moved forward.
Are you making that connection yourself, or is that something that's very...
Now, that just came to me when I watched it. I actually saw it again recently.
Yeah. Good call, though. I mean, and for people who are like, well, that's Stanley Kubrick. He would never watch a film like Legend of Hell House. Actually, that's not true. Kubrick was a huge genre fan.
Yeah, and actually, to my point, there's another movie called Burnt Offerings, which isn't so much in this specific genre of haunted houses itself, but I gotta mention because Burnt Offerings is so much The Shining, and Kubrick said he used it as inspiration, and in some ways you could almost see a lawsuit. It's so close to The Shining, so obviously he was using it as inspiration.
One of my favorite movies, actually, and one of the films I saw many, many times by myself as a child in the theater, because that's back when PG horror could be really, really scary. To break Burnt Offerings down a little bit, a family. It's Karen Black, Oliver Reed, and their son is played by Lee Montgomery. He's also the kid in that rat movie Ben, who actually he does film music now. He's still kind of involved in the industry, but they're kind of down on their luck. They need to rent a cheap place. Grandma's coming to stay with them for the summer, played by Betty Davis. That's no joke. Yeah. And they find a deal almost too good to be true in a palatial summer rental. And they go to apply for the job. Burgess Meredith is this creepy old man in a wheelchair. And I think Eileen Hackett, or I forget who plays his sister, but they give this family the gig. They're like, oh, great, and they're like, there's this one thing, you need to take care of Mother. She's going to be upstairs. She never comes out of her room. Blah blah blah. Well, foreshadowing number 1. Who is Mother upstairs? So they get the house. They move in for the summer. It's a deal too good to be true. And really, really bad things start happening. And one of my favorite things in the film is the chauffeur.
Oh, the best.
This creepy, wide-awake nightmare that the father, played by Oliver Reed, keeps having, where he comes to take him away. And he looks like Mr. Sardonicus, kind of, from the old William Castle movie. This huge kind of Joker's grin on his face. Pasty white. It's one of the creepiest characters I've ever seen. Nothing to do with gore, everything to do with fear.
It's played by this great character actor named Anthony James,
yes,
who a lot of people probably knew him from TV because he was always the bad guy in TV shows back in the 70s and 80s. I remember my first experience was in a Buck Rogers TV show.
Yes.
He played a guy with like a diseased, burn-off face, and he was so creepy. That haunted me as a little kid, I love that guy, but all he does is smile, and it's the creepiest grin ever. It's the stuff of nightmares in that movie.
And so as things are escalating, and the family's doubting each other, then physical things start happening, and there's an escape scene where they try to leave the house, where the father looks out the window, and the the siding on this old, beautiful palatial home is ripping itself off and replacing itself. And that's the point where they know the house is alive. And they're not tenants, they're food. And it's time to get the hell out of Dodge. And I won't ruin things, but watch this if you've not seen it, and remind yourself that this was the type of PG horror film we got in the 70s. It does not end well for anybody. And you're right, it's very shining. I mean, there's a shot at the end where they're panning across a mother's room and this collection of photographs, and you realize it's all the people that have been consumed by the house for decades.
Yep.
You're right. Good call, Ben.
What about, does Amityville horror fit into that kind of subcategory?
I think so. So we're kind of this is the haunted possessions. Like the people in Burnt Offerings are getting possessed by the house, you know. And Amityville is totally. Of course, that was based on a true story. The true story is terrifying.
That's actually been acknowledged as being a hoax. Just to be clear.
We'll
get into Ed and Lorraine Warren when The Conjuring comes up too.
I think there's still some doubt on that, but okay.
Well, there's been a lot of different stories because, like, there's the book that the movie was based on, and I read that book in high school, and I was up for about a week because I kept reading it at night like an idiot. But the thing that was so terrifying about the book itself was that even during the daytime, these people were not safe.
Yeah.
You know, in the film, most of the activity takes place at night, but in the book, so much happens during the day. Like the climax of the story in the book, when they flee the house and everything's just going to hell in a handbasket, is the daytime.
I love daytime horror, actually. I consider it a subgenre. I think when you can terrify someone in the sunlight, it's 10 times creepier. But anyway, go ahead, Kelby.
Burnt Offerings is all during the daytime. There's also no night shots. Yeah.
That's terrifying. But so there's the book that the movie was taken off of, and then there's a documentary.
Yeah, about Chris.
One of the sons. Yeah. Right. And so I don't know if
I interviewed him.
Yeah, and a lot of the stuff he talks about is not what was in the book.
No.
It's a little
less,
but
that's what I was gonna say, is that the actual book it's based off of may be a hoax, but the actual story that inspired the book, I think, still has some accuracy. So the murder in the house prior to the Lutzes moving in, and the reason behind the murder, according to some people. Yep.
I had an opportunity to talk with Chris for a brief period, and there's a lot of stuff that's not adding up there. I don't want to analyze anybody too hard, but I think there's a lot of stuff going on with that guy.
Yeah.
And when there's a scene in the film where he goes and visits Lorraine Warren, the surviving member of the couple, Ed and Lorraine Warren, so-called demonologists. Mm-hmm. And I won't get into it here. I could even probably be held liable for what I want to say, but I know a writer who worked with them on a case and lived in a house during the case with them. And according to him, no names, but he's a pretty well-known horror author who was hired to do a book about this case. And to put it incredibly euphemistically, he said that they were covering a lot of stuff up that was really happening and blaming it on entities and demons so they could sell books. Mm-hmm. While some members of this family were being, again, to put it lightly, abused, and it wasn't by supernatural forces.
Right.
So in that regard, I have a really big problem with the Warrens. And in the documentary about Chris Lutz, I forget what it's called, like My Amityville or something like that.
Yeah.
He goes to visit her, and like she pulls out this cross made of wood, saying it was like made from the crucifix at the crucifixion. They can't even prove that. So how the hell can it be from that? She's a fucking crackpot who either is completely corrupt and is just selling this like a charlatan in snake oil, or, and I think this is probably more the case, I think she may be halfway psychotic and a pathological liar. And like a lot of evangelical people, They'll tell a lie and then they'll teach themselves how to believe it.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, there's some validity to the Amityville thing. The family was murdered. I mean, the Amityville Horror 2, The Possession, is probably more accurate than the first film. Which, by the way, see that. Great Possession movie.
That one was crazy. That was a really... I think the thing that creeped me out the most in the sequel is when the teenage son takes his headphones off and the voice comes out telling him to, like, kill everyone. I think that was probably the most disturbing part of the film for me.
One of the greatest sequels ever made, actually. And shout out to actress Rutanya Alda, who plays the mother in that. I love you, Rutanya!
I also got to mention the director of that was the guy that made Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. So there you go. But he also wrote Fright Night Part 2. So there,
which is also underrated, in my opinion. Yes. What a bizarre sequel that is. And we're talking the original Fright Night 2, not the recent sequel to the Colin Farrell version. Which I didn't hate.
There was a sequel to the Colin Farrell version?
Yeah.
Yep.
I didn't know that.
It was direct to DVD.
And it's way better than it should be. Actually, again, another shout out, edited by my pal Don.
I really enjoyed.
Probably on the show soon.
Oh, nice.
And it features a female lead, like Fright Night 2, the original does too. So respect for that.
Yeah.
Gosh, let me see what else do we got here. You know what? You brought up a movie starring Don Knotts, Ben, that I want to hear you pontificate on because it's been one of my favorite movies since I was a little tiny kid. It's probably the first movie I remember seeing in a theater, actually.
Wow.
Matinee time, the day camp I went to, we'd go to the movies once a week.
Man, because that's 1966 when it was in theaters, so...
Well, okay, then I saw, back when I was a kid in the early 70s, theaters would do matinee screenings, like almost like Bible screenings.
Yeah.
The day camp that I attended, we went to the movies every Friday. And one of those Fridays was The Ghosted Mr. Chicken.
Yes. So the only thing I got to say about it is that it's, a great subgenre of horror comedy, but there's actually a few kind of scary moments in it still. They're not as scary because you see Don Knotts' eyes bugging out, more, and it just makes you laugh because he's so funny. But it's about a sort of a down on his luck reporter that works in the basement of the local newspaper because he is going nowhere fast. And
Carl Kolchak.
What's that?
Carl Kolchak.
Yes. And they give him an assignment to go to this house, and it's haunted, and he sees the organ playing itself late at night. That's like the big inciting event of this whole thing. And of course the town doesn't believe it, and then they all go in and it doesn't play, and there's a great twist ending. It's actually Don Knotts, everybody knows from the Andy Griffith Show and Three's Company and all his TV work, but I always think of him in It's a Mad, Mad, Mad World, which is like my other favorite comedy of all time. And he's only in it for like 10 minutes, but it's the funniest scene of that whole movie, and that's saying something because that movie's funny. Yeah. So
like everybody's only in it for 10 minutes because it's one of those old films that had like they hired every actor in the world. It was a salad. It was almost like a variety show on film with a plot.
Yep. It's
speaking about It's a Mad, 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 Mad World, not The Ghost of Mr. Chicken.
Right.
Yeah, dude. Have you seen Ghost of Mr. Chicken, Kelby?
No, I have not.
It's incredible fun, and talk about a perfect gateway film for children into the horror genre.
Yeah, totally. It really is. Yep. It's G-rated. I mean, it's great. Yeah.
It's very Scooby-Doo in its way, but with valid scares leading up to the reveal about what's really going on.
Nice.
Yep.
Kelby, you want to pick one?
Well, I picked the Amityville Horror.
Oh, that's right, you did.
As far as that particular subcategory is concerned, right?
Here's one that, to me, fits in with Ghost of Mr. Chicken, and that's House on Haunted Hill, 1959 version.
Yeah.
Because it's so campy. It's so incredibly campy, and yet there is a few moments, and it works so well because it's so jokey and ridiculous. Yeah. And then there's suddenly these weird... Sean's got a Vincent Price tattoo, of course. But what's so cool about this movie is that everything is super stupid. And then suddenly there's these mundane moments that are actually kind of creepy, and then they get really terrifying. It's weird, you know? It's because it puts you so off guard that I think the scares hit way better in that movie than some others.
Worth mentioning, it's a William Castle movie. I mean, he was the godfather of exploitation cinema. That movie Matinee with John Goodman by Joe Dante, about the filmmaker who takes his movies around and puts gimmicks in the theaters, is based on William Castle. And during House on the Haunted Hill, the gimmick he used there was they put a zip line in the back of the theater up by the projection booth. This is back when it was all single screens and huge auditoriums, and there was a lot of room to play with. And attach it to the movie screen, and during key points in the movie, they would let loose skeletons down the zip line. You know, like he made The Tingler about the creature that's built from fear, and it's kind of based on like weird LSD research. And he put buzzers in some of the seats in the theater, so when the Tingler shows up, bzzz, you get, you know. Yeah. And one of my favorite gimmicks, just to acknowledge Mr. Castle a little more, is, I forget what film it was, but one of his movies, they had a contract that you had to sign before you could see it in case you got scared to death. And they had a little booth. They set up a little booth under the screen called Coward's Corner with little yellow footprints leading up to it. So if the movie was too scary and you wanted your money back, you could get it, but you had to go sit in Coward's Corner right underneath the movie screen for 5 minutes.
I watched the Riff Tracks version of House on Haunted Hill.
Sacrilege!
It was funny! The scene where the old lady just shows up out of nowhere, the creepy, scary old lady, and then just kind of zooms out of the room. They made a roller skating joke, and I laughed.
That's actually a pretty renowned image, actually, that I see repeated a lot. And I guess it's worth mentioning, too, since we're talking about haunted houses, William Castle's probably most well known for the original 13 Ghosts,
right,
as well.
Oh, with the spooky glasses.
The original version, you could put on the glass. You could put on these special glasses, and it would reveal the ghosts on the screen. And again, kind of a Scooby-Doo vibe at the end of the day, but definitely worth your time. As is the remake. I'll say it.
The remake's good.
You got it's totally Scooby-Doo. I mean, Scooby-Doo took everything out of. I mean, even the reveal of the woman is just like in Scooby-Doo when you first see the monster. You know, that really makes sense. You know, but actually, if you're not getting jokey about that woman, she actually is pretty creepy. I think it's pretty effective.
When she shows up the first time, it's a terrifying makeup, and it comes out of nowhere. But then she zooms out of the room. Yes. You're like, oh, Nana's just trying on her roller skates. Don't worry about it.
a great hag in horror.
Oh yeah.
The beginning is notable, and for people that haven't seen this and go watch it, it won't work for you. But boy, did it work! I think in the theater, it's notable because the first 2 minutes of the film is just a black screen with scary screaming and noises and stuff. And actually, if you think about being in a dark theater and hearing that in 1959, I think it would have been really effective. It doesn't work as much on TV, but it actually started the whole craze of people buying records with just scary sounds on them. That's where that came from, that movie. So,
really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Wow.
Always learn something new on Moviefreak.
It also stars Elijah Cook, and I gotta mention him because he's like one of my favorite character actors from the 50s and 60s. He was in Star Trek the original series as the guy that had his face all burnt and they could only push a button and have a light show yes or no. You remember the trial with Kirk and Spock? And
Captain Pike.
Yep, Captain Pike. And then he's also in Rosemary's Baby, which people probably know.
Also produced by William Castle.
That's right, exactly. That's what I was
directed by Roman Polanski. William Castle actually shows up in a cameo in that when Rosemary has run away and she's at the phone booth calling her shrink. He's the guy at the phone booth who gets out of the way so she can use.
Yep.
As I push my nerd glasses higher up on my nose. My horror nerd glasses, though. They're red. Color blood.
Kelby, have you seen The Changeling?
No, and I need to. I know I need to because a lot of people talk about it, and I really need to see it, but I can't. I don't think it's available for streaming, so I'd have to rent it off Amazon or something.
I'll send you a DVD.
Yay! Thank you.
It's amazing. But go ahead, The Changeling, Ben.
Oh, I just I gotta mention it because I think it's one of the most effective and best haunted house movies ever. And it turns out that there's sort of a ghost or entity in the place. But it stars George C. Scott, who everybody knows from Patton. Of course, I love him in Doctor Strangelove, but he's one of my favorite actors, classic actors. And
I'm going to throw out Day of the Dolphin, too, real quick.
What?
Day of the Dolphin, where he plays the scientist who trains the dolphins to be presidential assassins.
Yes.
What?
It's really rational. It's really good. It's very kind of Michael Crichton-esque.
Yes.
Yeah, they're planting aqua bombs on this boat where the president's going to go, and it's like a CIA project, and he's learning to communicate with dolphins. Anyway, not to derail it, but little George C. Scott love going on there. And Exorcist 3.
Do they fight sharks with freaking laser beams?
No, it's nothing that. It's not nearly as corny as how I just described it.
It's not comical, actually. Yeah,
It's a tech thriller. It's an early 70s paranoia, conspiracy theory, technical thriller.
Terrible title, right? Maybe doesn't hold up as well today.
No. But anyway, go ahead, The Changeling.
Yeah, so if anybody doesn't know it, George C. Scott sort of has to go live in this secluded mansion, and it works so well because George C. Scott is a force of nature in movies. I mean, he's such a strong personality. Think of Patton living in a haunted house, and that gives you a little bit of idea of what this is. The first time that he hears things or whatever, he doesn't get scared. He yells at the house, like, what the hell do you want? You know, like, he's like going to go toe-to-toe with this ghost. I love that, you know. And then, of course, he's out of his league not too long later. But and the threat goes really high because he's such a strong character. It's also written by William Gray, who wrote Prom Night with Jamie Lee Curtis, if anybody...
And The Changeling is definitely the better of the two films. I'm sorry that... You know, in this regard, I think it's also worth mentioning a movie that I think pairs with it really nicely, and that's Nicholas Roeg's Don't Look Now, which wasn't even initially on my list. Donald Sutherland and Julie Christie are a couple who have lost their child. Their young daughter is drowned. They moved to France. I think it's France or something. I just bought the Criterion finally again. I haven't seen it in a few years, but
France or Italy?
It's France or Italy. The same thing. I'm kidding. But yeah, and it's just this kind of look at what the loss of a child will do to a marriage, and then he starts seeing her, and it's a very subtle, rational, heart-wrenching kind of ghost story. It's part anti-love story in the fact that you see this couple really trying to hang on to what they have after losing their lovely child, and then the question of sanity or insanity coming into it as Donald Sutherland starts seeing his daughter, and they're near a pond, and in the movie the daughter drowns and he starts seeing her in the pond. Yeah. And I don't want to give away a lot more. It plays as well as a horror double feature as it would in an art house. Again, it's Nicholas Roeg, one of the most respected filmmakers from the early 70s. If you've not seen Walkabout as well, his film before that, those are two of the most powerful films I've ever seen in my life. Highly recommended. Tread with care, though, if you're a parent, because it's going to really screw with your heart.
It's got some great pathos in that.
Don't Look Now?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, so you've seen it too?
Yeah.
Awesome.
If you, I gotta mention Donald Sutherland because, man, he had some great horror movies in the 70s, because he also did the Invasion of the Body Snatchers remake, which is just genius.
It's the best iteration of that story ever.
Yeah.
And I like how they respect the original, because they have Kevin McCarthy from the first one run out into traffic as his character going, "They're here! They're here!" And it's just kind of like, oh, that's just another crazy. Yep. So it's technically it's a sequel, but it's really a remake. And I'll just say the hobo musician and his dog, when the dog runs up,
yep,
wearing the hobo's face, yeah,
yep,
classy.
It's got kind of this weird Cronenberg overtone too, with all the body horror and everything. I don't know, it's awesome.
But they don't live in a haunted house. It's pods from outer space trying to turn us all into communists. So
good Halloween movie though. It's pretty scary.
Absolutely, it's in my top 10, 12 that I watch every October.
Well, let's talk about one of the most important haunted house movies ever, and that's The Haunting from 1963.
Maybe the single most important haunted house movie, along with another one that we're going to bring up afterwards. Kelby, you want to kick it off?
With what? The Haunting?
Yeah, The Haunting.
Well, I watched it for the first time recently, which was fun. It's definitely a slow burn, which I like. I like horror that's a slow burn. For those playing at home who have never watched The Haunting, it's about this doctor who wants to do an experiment at this house they call Hill House to see if it's really haunted, and so he brings two women, one who's kind of clairvoyant and one who's kind of this nervous wreck who was traumatized from taking care of her elderly mother while she was sick. And he also has to bring the people who own the house's son as like a chaperone,
yeah.
Right?
And if this is kind of sounding familiar, it was an incredibly profound influence on Hell House, right down to the name. But anyway, go ahead.
So they move into this house to conduct experiments, and a lot of creepy stuff happens, but a lot of the time you're not even sure if it's actually taking place or if it's all in the mind of Eleanor, who the main female character, who's the nervous wreck with the traumatic past.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of theories tying it into that she's sexually repressed, she's schizophrenic. And one thing we were talking about before we started recording, Kelby and I were talking about the old trope of the nervous woman, the woman with the nervous condition. And,
yeah.
Can you remark a little bit about that, Kelby, as far as the character of Eleanor? Where do you think it's all coming from?
Well, I can see how a lot of it is in her own head. I mean, anything as far as the house wanting her, because that's the whole thing about her, is that she thinks the house is calling her specifically, and that it wants her to be there, and that she belongs to it and it belongs to her. I think that's all a mental thing, but then there are certain scenes in the film where other characters are involved and things
The doorknob.
Right, where the
door.
door...
You will never look at a doorknob the same way again after you watch this film.
Well, the whole door practically breathes, like it's inhaling and exhaling, and there's other characters present for that. So I feel like it's a combination of something is actually in the house, but she also convinces herself that she belongs there. And there's a scene where someone wrote "Help Eleanor come home" on the wall in chalk. I think she wrote it herself and did remember doing it.
I agree.
I gotta disagree with you guys on that. I think the beginning where they recount all the strange deaths and stuff in the house, and then the end when they tie it back into what happens, I think that there's something more going on there than just her mental state. That's why I like the movie though, because it's up for interpretation.
Well, I think it's both. I agree with Kelby.
Yeah.
I think there's something really going on, and it's exacerbated by her mental state.
It's possible, yeah. That could be another interpretation. I just want to talk about the nervous wreck woman, because that stupid trope comes up all the time in 50s and 60s horror movies, as if women were so fragile mentally that they couldn't handle getting scared, and so it's constantly the male character sort of, they always have a doctor that's prescribing the woman as mentally challenged, not able to handle things.
And women were incredibly victimized over it too, like by doctors and stuff. Like when a woman had a quote-unquote nervous condition, she would go get massaged by a doctor.
Oh, gosh.
They'd rub one out for her.
Well,
so they basically have mental problems and then go to a doctor and get fucking molested.
Yeah, and that's happened all throughout history. Like, most of the women who, back in the Victorian times, were put into asylums, they were put there because they were considered hysteric.
Yeah.
When really they were probably suffering from, postpartum or regular depression or, any other sort of mental illness that could be better treated if they were not being locked away. And Sean, you're totally correct. There's actually a play, I believe it was by Sarah Rule. It's set way back though, when the invention of the vibrator actually happened, and it's called In the Other Room, or The Vibrator Play. And the whole invention of the electric vibrator came from the fact that the doctors who were performing those procedures of the, I forget
Digital stimulation, we'll call it.
but they were doing it by hand with a device that I think was on a crank or something. They found that to be tiresome and that it took too long, and that's why the electric vibrator was invented, was to speed up the process.
So can we just call that a silver lining, I guess, then?
I guess so. We could get something good kind of came out of it, I guess.
And men have been trying to live that down ever since. You just created your own competition, buddy, and you aren't any competition for it, so step off!
Now, by the way, this is not to trash on The Haunting, because of all the tropes with women and fragile, this one plays the most into the actual plot and makes the most sense, maybe. Because
and it's incredibly sympathetic.
Yeah, and it's certainly not... she's actually the main protagonist, and you care about her the whole time. And this was directed by Robert Wise, who is one of the greatest directors of all time. He made The Sound of Music, he made Day the Earth Stood Still, he made Star Trek The Motion Picture. I know a lot of people hate it, I love it.
Incredibly underrated. Since
yes.
it's a Blu-ray,
Yes.
It might be my favorite of the series now.
It is,
Can't believe I'm saying that.
Wrath of Khan, but yeah, it's very close. Anyways, and Julie Harris actually is in it, and she was in East of Eden, which I think is...
So these are A-list
yeah. Well, she plays
filmmakers and actors.
What's that?
Julie Harris plays Eleanor, the main character?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Pretty sure she does.
It's Julie Harris.
Yeah.
I can't remember his real name, but he played Riff in West Side Story. Hambley? Is that his last name? He plays Luke.
And also, the guy who plays the dude who brings them all together, which I should know his name, he's in Lucio Fulci's Zombie. He went and did a whole bunch of sleazy Italian horror later in life, so...
The original book that this is based off of was called The Haunting of Hill House, so that just tells you how many movies copied this later.
Shirley Jackson,
so
baby.
Influential.
Shirley Jackson. Read it if you haven't, listeners. And also, check out her other novel, We Have Always Lived in This Castle.
Good title.
Gothy and amazing and really groundbreaking and a really nice perspective. And this is probably why, Ben, that the character of Eleanor is sympathetic, because it was written by a woman, damn it.
Yeah, that's right.
For the most part.
I just had a thought.
No way.
Well, I mean, we might have already kind of talked about it, but the whole, what if the house is calling Eleanor because it knows that she's hysterical and is easy to prey on?
That's to me what I think's more happening, that she's more accessible to the house because of her mental issues.
Yep.
You know?
And there's even a theory that kind of goes beyond that, in that the fact that the house loves her and wants to pull her out of it.
There's a lot.
And give her a safe place.
And maybe it did to all the other women too. Maybe it because it knew, the house itself knew that Hugh Crane was a horrible man, and therefore just kept taking all these women from him.
Right.
And remember what happens to her at the end. That just proves right there the house did not want her to leave. You know, so.
Yeah.
Right.
But on the same token, I don't necessarily think it was after her.
No, not
in a malevolent way. It's almost like a couple of star-crossed lovers, you know, finally meeting. Again, like you were saying, Ben, this is one of the brilliant things about this film, is it opens itself up to so much interpretation that goes well beyond the horror genre.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'd have to say, and I guess I'll take a vote here, I'd have to say that at the end of the day, it's probably the single most important ghost/haunted house film that's been made.
Certainly for its influence, yeah. In modern times, and actually this is a good segue, I might say that The Shining is, and that's
Absolutely.
not to say it's better or not, but I think more people have interacted with The Shining now than The Haunting. The Haunting actually is rare that I meet people that have even seen it, you know, just regular Joe Blow on the street, but almost everybody's seen The Shining, and it's hugely influential, even in modern day horror. So.
And it's ironic because The Haunting actually still to this day tops best of lists from renowned critics and film associations. It hovers very closely to Citizen Kane in the amount of respect it gets among filmmakers and film aficionados. It's barely considered a horror film at this point in a lot of ways.
Let's talk about The Shining for a second.
Actually, hold on.
Okay.
Because there's another movie that you brought up, Ben, that I had forgotten about, that I think pairs with this, and it's from about the same time, and that's The Innocents.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Based on Henry James's Turn of the Screw.
Yeah, it's actually a good double feature with The Haunting in some ways.
Absolutely. You want to break it down just quickly?
Sure. It's a black and white film, 1961. It's directed by Jack Clayton, who made, I guess a lot of people know his work from like The Great Gatsby, the Robert Redford one.
Mm-hmm.
And stars Deborah Kerr. She was in From Here to Eternity, which, you know, I say that word, but a lot of people maybe haven't seen the movie, but everybody's seen that scene spoof where they're kissing on the beach and the waves crash over them.
Rolling around in the sand, yeah.
That's from that movie. And anyways, it's about a lady who, she's like a governess or something, and she goes to this house to take care of these two kids. And of course the house, you know, is haunted or whatever, or the kids are being, you know, chased by something. But it's in some ways it's like The Haunting because it's up for interpretation whether or not it really is haunting or whether it's in her head. So,
which I think is a marvelous trope for ghost films, going back to what we were discussing earlier about is it internal or external?
Yeah.
And these days you see a lot of literal interpretations. It's either this or it's that.
Right.
But in the case of The Haunting and The Innocents, it's not. And that twists your brain around a lot more. I want to mention a third one too, just to kind of cap it off. And so if you want an old school ghosty triple feature, also check out The Uninvited with Ray Milland, which I won't go into heavily here. It's a little bit softer. It's not quite as terrifying, and it's a bit of a love story, but that makes a perfect triumvirate of 50s era ghost stories. All beautifully shot in monochrome black and white. Yeah, you're in for a visual treat when you watch The Haunting or The Innocents in particular. Like in The Innocents, Ben, like when they're looking across the pond and see the woman in black standing there.
Awesome.
I just got goose nipples, dude. I just got goose. Oh, there's a ghost in the room with me, probably. That's what it is.
Not funny. Not as funny as you think that is.
There's one behind you, though, Kelby.
That's not funny at all.
So should we talk The Shining for a second?
Sure, absolutely. We've got to go there at least for a second.
Have you guys seen Room 237, the documentary?
Yes.
What the hell was that?
It was a joke that a lot of people took seriously.
You know, The Shining works on so many levels, and it's open to so much interpretation, as most Kubrick films are. They work on multiple levels, but
as long as you're not considering the actual Stephen King novel, right? Like if
well,
you're just...
that's right. Yeah, I guess we should say when I talk about The Shining, I mean the movie. The book is its own thing, and although it's based off the book, there's so many things that are different that you know. I get why Stephen King hates the movie, but I'm sorry, I like both.
Yes.
So.
Stephen King is wrong in this instance.
Well, wouldn't be the first time.
But Room 237, just for anybody who doesn't know, was a documentary created, I think it was like 2 or 3 years ago, that was about kooky nut guys talking about their interpretations of The Shining. And here, when I started watching, I thought, oh, this is going to be cool, because I have my own theories, and I want to have my mind expanded. And then what you find is it's so bizarre that you can't even hardly get into the theory.
It makes the Zapruder film and all the Kennedy conspiracy theories seem like child's play. Also, the same guys who made that recently did The Nightmare about the sleep terror.
Oh yeah.
Stuff.
I haven't seen
which I've not seen yet, but I know a lot of people that movie pissed off. So I'm not sure why, but I think they're taking a piss though, man. I think it's a lark.
Room 237 plays like a comedy to me. It's too ridiculous to be taken seriously. By the way, if anybody doesn't know, the reason it's called Room 237 is that's where Jack Nicholson meets the old woman in the bathtub.
It's where the entity is basically the main entity is centered.
Yes. So let's talk a little bit about The Shining, because I want to know what you guys think. Actually, let's talk interpretation. What do you think it's about?
I think it's about an abusive alcoholic husband and his devolvement into insanity.
certainly that's what's on its face.
Yeah. As far as interpretation, I mean, for me, it's still pretty cut and dry. I mean, it's in the mythology of the movie itself, it's factual. It's haunted.
Yeah.
You know, he's hanging out with the bartender who's telling him what he should do. He's meeting the guy, the attendant in the bathroom, who's telling him his family needs to be disciplined. So I don't know. You know, I read an interpretation about it that questioned the supernatural elements of the film, but for me, they're absolutely there. I mean, the picture at the end kind of proves it for me, where he's standing there with all the other people who are in the hotel at some New Year's Eve thing or whatever.
Well, not to mention the fact that the little boy experiences stuff by himself.
Right.
Like,
So I guess I'll ask you, Ben, what's your interpretation then? Because it seems like you have a theory.
Well, I guess I've got a couple, but this one plays well with burnt offerings, like I mentioned before, because the house itself, I think, or the hotel itself, is taking over people, and but the whole movie is about The Shining, and I always wonder, well, who are the people shining? Who's telling them these things? Who's oh man, what's his friend's name with his friend in his finger? Tony.
Oh, Tony.
Who's Tony, right? And why is Tony talking to them all the time? Are these ghosts? Are these beings from another world? What are they, you know? And why does that hotel somehow channel the energy even stronger than ever before? Because obviously his dad has the ability to shine, but doesn't understand it in the same way that Danny does. Or that the caretaker...
Yeah.
What's... Doc. No, that's what he calls the kid.
That is what he calls the kid. You're right. Yeah, I can IMDb it to find out the name.
Played by Scatman Crothers, though.
Yeah.
Cool.
Awesome actor, and I love
he's so
the
good in it.
fertility of that movie. By the way, that's one thing I think is really effective in horror is when everything's not all right at the end, right? And of course, he spends most of the movie trying to get back to them, only to walk in the door and take an axe to the chest.
Yeah,
you know,
that was so emotionally affecting to me.
Yeah,
it still is, because that scene with him and Danny at the table where he's having a heart-to-heart with Danny about their shared ability. He's got it too. Humanizes him so much. He's the potential protector, you know?
Yep.
And
that is ripped unceremoniously away. He gets that.
Dick Halloran is his character's name.
Yeah, Dick Halloran. That's right.
Yeah.
Dick, yes.
There's a lot of theories, too, that the guy who hires Jack is in on it.
Yes. And
he feeds the hotel?
Mm-hmm.
Watch the scene where he gives him the job and how the camera angles and how things change. By the way, the window at one point shows something and then it shows a different thing, like he's passing through time while he's talking to that guy.
Yeah.
There's a lot of play with time in that movie too.
Maybe like what we thought of The Haunting, where Jack is an abusive alcoholic father, and that's the kind of individual the hotel
damaged,
likes to feed
easy
on.
to get into, easy to take over.
Yeah,
is wanting, is searching, needs something, is missing something in their life.
The hotel is evil and seeks out evil individuals to feed it.
And like evil will do, I can help you. I can fill that hole in you.
Yeah.
Just trust in me. Like the snake from Jungle Book. You know, it's just like, trust in me.
Yes.
Don't do it out there. If anybody out there is living in a weird old hotel or an old house,
and they want you to take care of it,
don't trust it.
Don't.
Public service announcement. I luckily got a chance to talk to Joe Turkel 4 or 5 years ago. Super interesting guy. He's the guy that plays Lloyd the bartender in The Shining, right?
He's also in Blade Runner.
Well, he's actually, his big claim to fame, I think, in some ways, is he worked with Kubrick on more movies than any other actor. He's even in The Killing, which is Kubrick's sort of second but first official movie, right? That long ago. But he actually told me that his interpretation of Lloyd is that Lloyd is real, and that those scenes that we're seeing with Torrance talking to him are actually just flashbacks to what happened in the past already.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
Hold on. pausing. Oh shit, but that makes a lot of sense and kind of opens up the whole question of the malleability of time in those kinds of situations too. Again, though, man, it's like the movies that are open to so much interpretation are a blast because, I mean, look at us. You know, we could probably go on really all night.
Yeah, don't even let me get started on the people dressed in animal suits in the hotel room towards the end.
What the hell is going on with that anyway?
Well, in the book, it's this weird sexual thing. Like, especially the guy in the dog suit is like going around the party being like, "You want a dog? I'll be your dog." Like, he's so creepy.
So it's almost like B&D SM meets like old school furries.
Yeah.
But because it's not explained that way in the movie, it's so much more creepy and effective because it's not right. You know, you see it and you go, "That's not right." And it makes
there's something in these films that I love, and I call it nightmare logic. It's and it being unexplained in the film. You're right. It absolutely amplifies the nightmare logic because there's no how or why. It's just a big giant WTF with 20 exclamation marks.
There's two other things about The Shining to me that set it apart. One is Shelley Duvall's performance, which particularly I'm not a huge fan of hers, although I thought she was the perfect olive oil
Yeah,
in
she
the
was.
Puppet movie.
I agree.
But she is a nervous wreck. You talk about a woman character that's a nervous wreck. There's the ultimate right there.
She's got a reason, though.
Yeah,
you know,
like tortured her on set.
But the reason wasn't even the movie, although that worked perfectly. Kubrick treated her like dirt the entire film. He berated her in front of the cast.
Yeah.
He caused almost a nervous breakdown for the actress. And
Her hair started to fall out.
What?
Her hair started to fall out from being nervous.
But he got the performance that's just brilliant because of that. So, I
don't know if that justifies it, though.
I
I'm
actually,
not saying it does.
as an artist, I'm okay with it.
Yes.
I'm totally okay with it because that's going to last forever. Shelley Duvall will be gone from this earth for many, many years, and that performance is going to be looked at as one of the most incredible performances in film, regardless of it being a horror film. I mean, the shit that Friedkin put Ellen Burstyn through in The Exorcist, when she walks in and finds Reagan and she hits the wall, Friedkin was like, "Give her the juice," to the guy with the rope. And Ellen Burstyn now has back problems from it.
Yeah.
She totally understands why it was done. It's corny, but film is forever, man.
This was the era of method acting. So
absolutely.
You know, in a little bit defense of Kubrick, not a lot, because I agree it maybe had gone way too far. The other thing is, Shelley Duvall herself says that she's glad that it happened that way because she says she wouldn't been able to do that performance without that push. So all's fair in art and war, I guess, on that.
And she's a damn good filmmaker in her own right. I mean, Fairy Tale Theater, the project she put together for back in the day for cable was amazing. So I think she, especially in hindsight, now that she's got some distance, she's able to appreciate, in a way, the process. And yeah, like, you know, like we're all just kind of acknowledging, film is forever, man. And that performance is one for the ages, as corny as that sounds. It's amazing.
It's so believable because it was real. The other thing is that Kubrick made every cast member watch Eraserhead before the movie because he wanted to try to capture that vibe, that feeling of dread. Which actually George Lucas screened that right before Star Wars for the crew too. They were really big fans of Lynch, you know, maybe still are, or at least Lucas is. But I think that's perfect because actually there's a lot of feeling in The Shining that fits right in with the feel of Eraserhead.
Yeah, that makes me want to watch the movies next to each other.
Yeah, right.
Have you heard of that version of The Shining that somebody edited together where it's back to front? I think they talk about it in Room 237, actually.
Yes. I haven't watched it, though.
What did they do to it? How is it edited?
Didn't they superimpose it so you're seeing both the beginning and the end of the movie at the same time, and it kind of like concentric circles or something like that?
Isn't it just side by side? The movie plays at different backwards and forwards, and then it crosses over at some point.
Right. That's what it is. That's
when it hits the middle time code.
I've not watched it either, and I probably won't, but it's an interesting exercise.
Kelby, the reason why would anybody do this? It sounds stupid. Well, the reason is there's so many odd similarities. The film has this weird symmetry where shots will be exact, or scenes or emotions will be exactly timed.
It's almost like a visual palindrome in a way. I call it the pyramid structure, and then it inverts and it goes back. It gets wide and then it homes in again. And Kubrick, of course, was massively OCD. Anybody who's seen the documentary about him and his boxes of notes.
Oh.
So can you just imagine the meticulousness of that man in the editing room?
Yeah.
I mean, because he was also, that's why he's my favorite filmmaker overall. And that's rare for me to say, but is his micromanaging of his product was staggering, right down to the font and the posters and every little detail to the campaigns. Yeah, man, I miss Stanley Kubrick. I really do.
Yeah, I'm sorry, it's just not the same without him. He's probably my favorite too. I mean, every single genre he touched, he made a seminal film in it, if not the seminal film in it. So.
And another great example of, in my opinion, the best horror films are made by people not mired in the genre.
Yeah.
But mired in the craft of telling a story that happens to be a horror film.
Great.
Like
ditto comedies, ditto romantic films. Tell the story, let the framework be what it is.
Totally.
You know, I'll mention another movie in relation to The Shining, and that's Session 9. About these guys who go in to repaint and refurbish an old asylum and things.
Are they looking for asbestos, I think?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, they're asbestos removal guys. And God, can someone look up the director's name? I should.
Brad Anderson.
Brad Anderson, that's right. Didn't like the film at first. I was expecting, and this is back when like all the Japanese stuff was first hitting our shores, like Ringu, and I was expecting something a lot more viscerally intense and a lot more graphic. Not the case. It's another super slow burn, and you kind of have to wait till the end to really get a sense of what's actually happening. And it's a hard movie to talk about because it's a tone poem more than anything else. So just in relation, if you like The Shining and you haven't seen Session 9, it's got David Caruso in it as the lead. Highly, highly recommended. Not an easy film as far as wrapping your head around it, but incredibly rewarding. One of those movies that around the third time you really get a feel for it.
Right.
So where do we go from here? Kelby, I think you need to pick the next one.
Well, I was just looking at the poster behind you and was thinking about Coraline.
Oh, yeah.
It's kind of a haunted house ghost story in a way. There are ghosts.
Pontificate, my lady.
So Coraline is based on the Neil Gaiman book by the same name. It's a more of a children's story, and then Neil
Gaiman, man. Neil Gaiman.
And then they made a very beautiful stop motion film based on that book. Is it Henry Selznick?
Yeah, Henry Selick. Who everybody knows because he did The Nightmare Before Christmas and James the Giant Peach.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, of course, it's beautiful.
Oh, but Coraline's not Selick, though, is it?
Yeah. It is.
Oh, it is? Okay.
Yeah.
Because I know it's Leica Studios, who also did Paranorman.
Right.
There's another one for you.
Paranormal.
And the recent Box Trolls. So.
Yes.
Greatest animation studio next to Pixar in operation right now.
It's amazing and meticulous and detailed. It's magic. It's pure magic. So Coraline is about this little girl who moves into this new house with her parents, and she, one, doesn't like the fact that she had to move, and two, feels a little neglected by her parents because her mom is always busy and her dad is always in the movie. He's a composer and he's always thinking about his next song that he has to write. And she finds it's hard to say if it's like she goes through a door, but also sometimes when she sleeps, she goes to this alternate house, which is exactly the same as the house that she moved into, but more fantastical, and she meets her other parents.
Right, with the button eyes.
The button eyes. Yeah, and like her parents are super doting, and the house is lovely, and her mom is super attentive, but the more she visits this alternate house, the more things start to go horribly wrong.
Again, this speaks to the trope we were talking about of a person missing something being romanticized by an evil force.
Mm-hmm.
We can fix that for you. Just come with us.
Yeah. Come here. Yeah. And then she, there's that point in the film where she meets the ghost children who were the same as her, but they fell for it. Yeah. They fell for the other mother and paid for it with their lives.
God, I love that movie.
It's really
great. I love
great.
that movie. And then they follow it up with Paranorman, which is, you could almost say it's the Danny Torrance story in a well-adjusted family. I mean,
yeah.
Norman sees ghosts and the town thinks he's crazy and he ends up saving everybody at the end. It's a very basic premise, but it's so beautifully executed. And then again, like Leica Studios, man, they're the visual mastery just the mastery of the animators, and the fact that it's not CGI and you're seeing real. There's something in your third eye that tells you that that's a true three-dimensional object. And in the Leica films, holy God, man, I'm such a fan that I have a hard time talking about it.
Yeah.
Sometimes when I love something that much, I just try to enjoy it instead of break it down. Yeah, wow, it's weird. Leica Studios makes horror films for children.
Yeah, they do.
Box Trolls.
I also put, even though it's not from this studio, I put Monster House in this category too.
Yeah.
Great kids movies.
Oh, absolutely.
Scary. Well, and it's a haunted house movie.
Wasn't it? It was also distributed by DreamWorks, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think DreamWorks distributes pretty much all of Leica's films.
They do, yeah.
And it slots right into the tonality of everything, and another great gateway film for children to the softer side of the horror genre.
Well, and Monster House specifically is very dark, much darker than Coraline, I feel.
Oh, totally, yeah.
Well, the house wants to kill those kids.
Yeah, the house hates children because the woman who died in it also hated children.
Yeah, it doesn't go Scooby-Doo.
No.
It's just a bad place.
That's it.
Sleep on that, Cindy.
There you go.
Good night. Yeah, we're going to watch Monster House, honey, and then you're going to go to bed. Okay. Good night.
Yeah, it's probably, of all of them, it's the one I would caution young kids the most against, maybe. Although I grew up watching scary stuff and didn't think anything of it, but today's parents may want to watch it first and tread with caution, because it is pretty scary for a younger kid.
Let me see here. Do we have... Okay, Kelby, I'm looking at your list.
Oh, with all my new horror?
Yeah, that's fine. You're young, and like I said, I get jealous of people like you who haven't seen all these films a zillion times because you get to see them for the first time, man. And you're a lot younger than me, and probably Ben. So, yeah. Any elitists out there, get tossed. All right.
It's all good stuff. What on that list kind of?
I like your choice of Housebound from New Zealand.
Yeah, that's a classic, I think. Yeah.
It's really funny, and I really enjoyed it. And the main girl character in that is really fun because she's so abrasive. So for people who have not seen it, Housebound is a New Zealand film about a girl who has run into some trouble, and this particular arrest is like the final straw, and she has to go under house arrest, but she has to be in a stable environment, so the court rules that she needs to move back in with her parents. Mm-hmm. And she, when she was little, felt like that house was haunted, and now she's having to go back there as an adult and deal with this haunted house. While also dealing with her mom, who's a bit eccentric and kind of goofy.
And she can't leave. Which reminds me also of a recent Eric Red movie called 100 Feet with Famke Janssen, where she's an abused wife who killed her husband and has to wear the ankle bracelet and live there, and her husband comes back in spectral form to get her.
Ooh, that sounds...
Oh, it's really good. Super underrated. Eric Red's amazing anyway. He's one of the most underrated genre directors. He did Bad Moon, the werewolf movie with Michael Corey. Cohen and Tate, one of the most underrated
How that's so funny you bring that up. Nobody knows about that movie. I saw it recently and I thought, man, this is an unsung. It's got
and for Firefly fans, it's got Adam Baldwin in it.
Adam Baldwin
with Roy Scheider. So
Roy Scheider, one of his last films, actually.
Yeah. But not to derail from Housebound, and I want to add something to what you said. In that it's really funny. It's funny in the way that American Werewolf in London is funny. The situation is scary, but the characters themselves are incredibly hilarious.
Black humor, yes.
Yeah. So it's not like zany hitting you over the head with like comedic set pieces. It's the dialogue and the characters' reactions to these insane situations that's funny. And I want to give a shout out to the character of the security guy too.
I love that guy.
So good. The character.
Well, one of the greatest things about that film is that, like, as soon as the girl, something happens where she gets spooked and the ankle bracelet goes off because she goes too far down into the basement and it kind of glitches out while, like, an incident is happening. And the officer who's assigned to her comes to check it, and she's like, well, this house is haunted, and she's freaking out. And instead of the stereotypical thing where the cop is like, no, you're crazy, you're just trying to cover your ass, he starts pulling out all of this paranormal investigative equipment and just starts, like, doing a reading on the house.
Hilarious. Yeah.
And he's a total sweetheart, you know. It's like he never degrades her for it. And when people start coming on board with what's going on, and then there's a twist in the film. It also reminds me a lot, in a strange way, of the Wes Craven film The People Under the Stairs.
I was going to say, there's a lot of similarities there, yep.
Yeah. Highly, highly recommended. Is there anything else anybody wants to say about Housebound other than you should see it?
Just really good performances all around by all the actors. I think everyone was top notch.
Yeah.
Possibly the best horror movie of 2014, in my opinion. So.
It's up there for me, that, and I guess Spring is actually 2015, so yeah. An incredibly pleasant surprise. I actually kind of know the guy who produced it, Ant Timpson, and his taste is fucking immaculate. This guy knows horror films. He hangs out like with the Alamo Drafthouse people. You know, he's very, very involved with writers like Kiera Janice and helping young film programmers and filmmakers get going. And he was one of the guys behind ABCs of Death, which I didn't like a whole lot, but I love the premise and the venue that they're giving a lot of filmmakers to do quick little shorts. There are just too many of them for me. In one continuous space.
The whole alphabet, yeah.
But yeah, Ant Timpson is awesome. He also just shepherded a movie called Deathgasm about a bunch of metalheads who fight demons.
Oh yeah, I haven't seen that yet. Have you?
Well, as an ex-professional touring and recording metal musician with quite the pedigree, actually, I can throw out names like Exodus, Machine Head, Testament, DRI. That's all in my pedigree as far as people I played with. My red flags go up whenever a punk rock movie or a heavy metal movie comes out because they never get it right. Deathgasm gets almost all of it right.
Wow.
My only problem is the main character likes the band Trivium. If you're a true extreme metalhead, you think Trivium sucks. They're considered posers. But that's a small technicality, and the music they use is absolutely fitting. It's not studio musicians trying to do metal. They use actual metal, which I don't understand why more filmmakers don't when they're making metal movies. But yeah, Ant Timpson, shout out. Housebound, Deathgasm, ABCs of Death. All of it's good. A lot of good stuff coming out of New Zealand, actually.
Yeah.
So good. But, you know, you also mentioned a movie called The Pact, Kelby.
Yeah.
And I've not seen that.
It's pretty good. It was I believe it was an independent film. Like, it didn't get a whole lot of attention. I watched it on Netflix a few years ago. I believe it's still on there. There is a sequel that I have not seen yet, which I think just recently got put on Netflix. It's got, her name is Katie Lotz, I believe is her last name. She played Black Canary on CW's Arrow, and she's also going to be in their newest series, where it's the
Legends of Tomorrow or something like that.
Yeah, she's going to be White Canary on that. And it's kind of Katie Lotz is her name, Lotz, and it's similar to Housebound as far as like young troubled girl grew up in a house thinking it was haunted as a child, leaves, and then has to come back to that house. So that's really similar, but without a lot of the humor. There are some funny moments in The Pact, but it's mostly a very scary film, and it's a lot of anticipation scares. Like, you building up something happening is what makes it so scary.
I'm all over that.
But one of the best things about, in my opinion, about it is that Katie Lotz's reactions to when things get really scary. There's a scene where she gets super, super spooked in the middle of the night, and she just leaves. And then later realizes she is not wearing pants. Which is like one of the greatest scenes ever, because she's freaking out. She gets a pretty good distance away, and then she's like, shit, I am not wearing pants. And
to me, that's realistic. That's like the scene in Texas Chainsaw Massacre where Sally is trying to escape Leatherface, and she goes up the stairs and right out the window.
Yeah.
So it's a lot. What I like about The Pact is that it's a lot of realistic reactions to terrifying things. Like, her first instinct is to get out, which, most horror films is like, I'm gonna investigate more. Hello? Yeah, no. Get out of the house.
Yeah. Take the ghost's advice when it said, get out.
Go ahead and do that. I think you could actually do a double feature. I would recommend The Pact first, and then Housebound, because The Pact is creepy, and Housebound will put you in a nicer frame of mind at the end. You can sleep at night.
Easier to go from scared to laughing than from laughing to scared, usually, at least for me. Gee, well, let's see. We've covered a lot of ground, you guys. Let's wrap it up. Any final thoughts? Any last movie you want to throw out there before we get to the Halloween 100 Movie Challenge Part 2? I'll throw out Kwai-Dan, the Japanese ghost story anthology. Very easy to find. It's got a Criterion release. Just be sure you get the original version. It's been redone a couple of times. And a kind of obscure Japanese ghost revenge film called The Ghost Story of Yatsuya. That's Yatsuya. And you can find that on YouTube. It's very difficult to get a hold of otherwise. Otherwise, I would not say that. But yeah, Kwai-Dan and The Ghost Story of Yatsuya are definitely two that you need to check out. Subtitled, Japanese, different in tone, a nice departure from the Western ideal of what a ghost story is.
I got to mention Poltergeist, the 1982 version, because we didn't talk about it, and I don't think we necessarily need to go into it because everybody's seen it, but that one's, I think, a quintessential haunted house movie of the 80s. And probably a lot of people's most memorable horror film of the 80s because it was so mainstream. I mean, Spielberg produced and he actually directed a lot of it because Tobe Hooper wasn't really doing what he wanted there.
Even though they deny it, but you can look at the tone of the film and it's pretty apparent.
It's obvious which scenes are whose. Now, the other thing is that, of course, this year they just did a remake with Sam Rockwell, who I love. But unfortunately, the remake didn't do anything new to justify its existence. It just was like somebody, like a fan remaking the old movie. It was just really, really sad. So.
I don't snap to judge a remake because we have things like the remake of The Blob, the remake of The Invasion of the Body Snatchers, which, in my opinion, are both superior to the originals. The Hills Have Eyes remake, I think, is, I know it's heresy, but I think it's superior.
I like that remake of The Hills Have Eyes.
So I don't snap to judge. So I was actually kind of excited about what they were going to do with Poltergeist with the advent of new technologies that could come into play. None of it was done. And what my final piece of exasperation about that film was when they tied the rope to go into the netherworld to go get Carol Ann or whatever her name is in this version, and they tie the rope with an eye hook into a stucco wall. No. I mean, the movie lacks anything close to internal logic. When they come home and they find their son hanging from the tree after the tree's grabbed him out of his room, and his parents were out of the house, and he's terrified. They leave him alone in the living room while going to look for their daughter.
It's so bizarre.
That kid would have been attached to his mother's ankles.
Mm-hmm. She would have had to carry him the entire time.
Yeah, they would have had to have carried him. Yeah, I mean, just over and over and over and over and over. They screw the pooch on the entire concept. I feel so bad for the actors because the cast is really good.
Yeah, and I feel bad for Gil Kinnan because he directed Monster House, which was 100 times more creative and interesting. I don't know what he did on this one. It just failed me. So.
Who knows how much it was affected by committee.
True.
Yeah, it's obviously a major studio film, and I'm sure they had a lot of meddling in it, but I don't know.
It blew. The original is amazing. The remake blows.
By the way, Poltergeist 1982, there's another PG movie, that is truly terrifying. So,
the face ripping scene at the sink.
Oof.
Gee, okay, I've mentioned Qui-Gon, I've mentioned Yatsuya, you covered our ass and brought up Poltergeist.
I already mentioned Tale of Two Sisters, but I just want to hammer home how good that movie is.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Should we...
Challenge.
Yeah.
Well, let's take a break first. My tongue's about to fall out of my head. So we're going to listen to a little music and get together part 2 of our 100... well, I said that wrong. Of our Halloween 100 movie challenge. Enjoy. We'll be right back.
Ghosts are everywhere. Inside, big old bass tones deep in the belly of a fish. I can't help noticing their pearly teeth are flickering. Ghosts are everywhere. Some are superstars with freeform plastic paste on hair, driving, hiding behind sunglasses, and I just can't help but stare. And I hear them singing, na 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 na. Ghosts are everywhere. Na 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 na. Ghosts are everywhere. Na 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 na. Ghosts are everywhere. Na 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 na. Ghosts are everywhere, everywhere. Ghosts are certainly everywhere, swallowing whole trees and startling creatures of the sea. Ran into one under my covers and it gave me quite a scare. Ghosts are everywhere, flying through the air with the greatest of ease and landing here and there. Never ever ever missing a beat as they pound with some bones on a foam chair. And I hear them singing, na 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 na. Ghosts are everywhere. Na 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 na. Ghosts are everywhere. Na 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 na. Ghosts are everywhere. Na 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 na. Ghosts are everywhere, everywhere. They're in the drain, they're in the sink, they're in between all the thoughts that you think. And they're under my shoe and in garbage sacks in the middle of a mountain in space where it's black, and they're everywhere. Wandering free and brushing by me late at night at the store 24, picking up a box of customized cookies and disappearing through the door. And I hear them sing, na 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 na. Ghosts are everywhere. Na 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 na. Ghosts are everywhere. Na 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 na. Ghosts are
Okay, we're back, as we threatened or promised, or however you want to take it. So, guys, another 20. The second set of 20, bringing us up to 40. I'm
ready to write them all down because I probably haven't seen them.
I'm gonna spit them out too, okay? Because we went long. First up, Cemetery Man. Got to see it. A brilliant Italian zombie kind of comedy with Rupert Everett, directed by Michael Soavi, protege of Dario Argento's. Again, a beautiful, beautiful looking film. A lot of it takes place in a graveyard. Just see it, okay? Cemetery Man. I'll put up the trailer. Next would be Bay of Blood by Mario Bava. Bay of Blood, also known as Twitch of the Death Nerve, is pretty much assumed to be the true inspiration for the first Friday the 13th, and pretty much the entire 10 Little Indians style of the slasher genre. Came way, way before that was a movement, though. And stop me, you guys, if you want to say anything about these films. The next would be Michael Mann, known for Miami Vice, and his film The Keep, based on the F. Paul Wilson novel. It's a period piece. It's during World War II. Nazis take over a Polish castle that's got a god, like an evil god in it. Something that's kind of close to a vampire in the book. In the movie, it almost looks like Uncle Frank from Hellraiser. It's got no skin. It's all musculature. And this weird ethereal kind of genre-mashing semi-masterpiece. Essential. Lamora. Oh, go ahead, Ben. I see your finger.
Just want to mention we should do a Michael Mann show because I'm such a big fan.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Thief and you name it. I mean, obviously, the more
we should do commentaries for every episode of Miami Vice.
Yeah.
Actually, hindsight commentaries might be fun, you know, because they're always done when the material is fresh, and I don't really see any of them that look back on certain episodes of something and kind of contextualize its place in the modern pantheon of TV or film. Yeah, good idea. The next one on the list is Lamora, A Child's Tale of the Supernatural, an incredibly bizarre, dreamy, surrealistic, American-made, surprisingly by the look of it, vampire film from the early 70s. Next, Night of the Creeps. I mean, come on, man.
Yeah, we mentioned that on the show last time.
Yeah.
Yep.
Was that in the list last time?
No, but I just brought it up
good.
because I talked about that scene, my favorite scene in that movie, where Tom Atkins says that line about your boyfriends are dead, you know. So
yeah, your dates are here. The good news is your dates are here. The bad news is they're dead.
Yeah, it's a comedy. It's got horror elements. Every time I show it to somebody and they see the first 5 minutes with the little squatty alien dudes running around on their ship,
right?
People are sold. You know,
it is one of the most intense genre mashers in the world. It gets so much into the box. Fred Decker, you know, he also did the Monster Squad. So
that's right. Yep.
Oh, Monster Squad.
Yeah. Which will be on this list, but isn't yet, or whatever. Evil Dead Trap from Japan. It was the first extreme Japanese horror movie I ever saw. A newswoman gets a mysterious videotape in the mail that's basically like a snuff movie. She figures out where it was shot. She grabs her news crew and goes to investigate, and it goes off the rails. It starts almost as a slasher and becomes a supernatural thriller. It's a House of Traps film as well. The characters in it fall prey to the booby traps and the thing, and then, like I said,
Saw.
the end. Huh?
Sounds like Saw.
Way, way before Saw.
No, I know, but Saw must have taken some cues from this one.
Sure. It's also a lot like a couple of martial arts films that are like that, where the monks have to kind of make their way test style through a house. Following that, Ravenous, the very underrated cannibal film starring who's it, Robert Carlyle
and
Guy Pearce.
Guy Pearce, yeah.
Yeah.
The only great film to come out of Trauma, Mother's Day, the original version, about an insane old lady who teaches her Hick's Sons, How to Rape and Kill. And it follows 3 women from the city who decide to go camping and end up in the clutches of this crazy family. I never thought I'd use the words character development and trauma in the same sentence, but I just did.
You didn't like Cannibal the musical? You think?
Well, that's not really a trauma film. They bought it.
That's true. Oh. It was actually a thesis.
Yeah, and Cannibal the musical is actually incredibly clever. It's the guys who did South Park, so it's
right.
Gonna be awesome.
It was, whichever one of them was a music major, it was his thesis. Trey Parker, maybe.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, one that I know Ben likes, and again, going back to Michael Mann, is Manhunter.
Yeah. I think the best characterization of Hannibal Lecter, and I know that's going to hit some people like, what? Anthony Hopkins? No, not Anthony Hopkins, actually.
Brian Cox.
Yep, Brian Cox, and I think he's genius in it. Again, Michael Mann film. There you go. Is it Tom Noonan?
Yeah, Tom Noonan is Francis Dollarhide.
Yeah, the scary kind of murderer guy that you get
bites
to
off your lips.
Head. And of course, he actually, speaking of Monster Squad, he's Frankenstein.
Frankenstein. Yep.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, Manhunter is. And it's one of those movies that plays better as time goes on too. It's gotten better because it's kind of out of the mire of the Michael Mann, neon and heat kind of look that he did. And there's enough time now to look back and really see it as its own thing.
Classic.
One of my favorites, and again, to honor Mr. George C. Scott, is The Exorcist 3, based on the novel Legion by William Peter Blatty, making it really, truly in the pantheon of the mythology, The Exorcist 2. And George C. Scott takes over for, not Walter Pidgeon, who played the detective in the original. I should know this. It's my favorite damn movie. It's hard juggling all these names so quickly. Not Walter Pidgeon. Lee J. Cobb. He takes over for Lee J. Cobb in the role of Detective Kinderman. And boy, talk about some creep out moments. Neither of you have seen it, have you?
No.
Be careful with this movie, you guys. It is scary in a whole other way than The Exorcist is. There's a scene in an old age home that's going to fuck you up, and there's a scene in a hospital corridor that's really going to fuck you up. I won't go to the bathroom alone now when I watch this movie. I make sure I'm all peed and it's all good and I don't have to move and I can hide because this movie freaks me out.
Because the first Exorcist film kept me up for days after watching it, and I was in high school when I saw it.
That's my favorite. The Exorcist is still my favorite horror movie of all time. It's so effective. So I'm excited to hear that.
You
didn't bother with the sequels because
it's the only sequel. It's the only sequel.
Okay.
Really, like I said, in the mythology of the story that Blatty set up, dude, you're in for such a huge treat. I can't wait to hear what you guys think about Exorcist 3. Okay, here's one that I know Ben and I love, and you may have not seen, Kelby. It's a little bit before your time and a little bit obscure at this point, but that's John Badham's 1979 take on Dracula. Ben, I'm going to let you take that one.
Okay, so this is my favorite take on Dracula. It's the quintessential romanticized Dracula. It stars, Frank
Langella.
Frank Langella, who played Skeletor in Masters of the Universe.
Donald Pleasance.
Yes, who was, of course, in Halloween and Dr. Loomis. And it's actually scored by John Williams. It's 79, so this is like 2 years after his Star Wars score blew up, and, of course, a few years after Jaws, too. And it's got this beautiful romantic score, and Frank Langella is very sensual in the way he plays Dracula. There's a couple things that are kind of unique about this movie. It's very period. It's very gothic. It's shot beautifully, and he made sure there was no fangs. So it's got this kind of like more relatable Dracula there. In fact, you feel sorry for him at the end.
I also want to mention a couple more actors. The female lead is Kate Nelligan, and Holy moly, who plays Van Helsing? Sir Laurence Olivier, baby.
Laurence Olivier. Unbelievable, right?
So, and that scene where they go underneath the graveyard to find his daughter.
Yep.
One of the most terrifying things ever, and incredibly effective in the context of this film, because you've had this kind of romanticized Dracula up to this point, and then the shit hits the fan.
And he's scary. Yeah, and you don't like him suddenly, and you're shocked by that. That's right. It's also, I gotta say, it's written by W.D. Richter, and for those who don't know, he wrote Big Trouble in Little China, which is one of my absolute favorite movies of all time. So.
That's how we met, actually. Ben and I were both at was it FanX, right?
Yeah, FanX.
It was an SLC Comic Con, and I was slotted to do the James Hong interview on stage, and like minutes before, right? It was just a few minutes before we met, and you were telling me about your thing in Seattle. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I just I did a night with James Hong. I met him actually. This is kind of a funny story. I did a fan comic for Big Trouble in Little China, and I sent James Hong a copy. I found his address through his publicist, and I left my phone number on the comic, and he called me while I was in the shower, actually. And I was like, what? I got a call from LA. What the heck? Who is this person? And I listened to the message, and James Hong did his Lopan voice.
Oh, my.
That's so cool.
Ben, you're in big trouble sending me stuff like this. You know, it was hilarious. He's very funny. One of the funniest people you're ever around. Anyways, we've become friends since then. I mean, when I go to LA, I visit him. And so when he came to Comic-Con, Sean let me sit in on the panel and ask him some questions and stuff. So
yeah, and that's how we met. And you did a brilliant job, actually. You really rocked that hard. And now look at us. We're here.
Yeah, W.D. Richter also wrote Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the 78 version that we were talking about with Donald.
Really?
Yeah. He's an awesome writer. I love
did not know that. Wow.
But Dracula 1979, that's the one to see. It's so classic. It's aged well because it's so period. It's set in like 1916. And so even for a 70s film, it looks really good today.
And again, yeah, that score. It... not factoring in the classics, it's probably my favorite John Williams score. It reminds me a lot of John Barry.
Yeah, actually, that's true.
I love John Barry.
Yeah. Okay, the next one on the list is Cronenberg's kind of first movie, They Came From Within, about a sexually transmitted disease running rampant in a then very modern high-rise building. Take that as you will. It's one of the quintessential body horror films, and absolutely worth your time. Co-stars one of the nicest women in the industry I know, Lynn Lowry. She was also in The Crazies. She's in I Drink Your Blood, a hippie satanic cult film from the early 70s. It's also amazing. Also, The Beyond. You need to see that. Most of you are out there are like, I have. Probably Lucio Fulci's greatest achievement in the horror genre. Really hard to explain because, again, it's Italian and the screenwriting is a little loose, to put it lightly. So it's one of those films I watch with my Nightmare Logic glasses on. It's just a dream. Just go with it. Whatever happens, just taking the imagery. But this woman, Catriona MacCall, takes over a hotel in New Orleans, and it turns out to be one of the 7 gates of hell.
Ooh.
And you're off and running. Super full of amazing set pieces and weird, why aren't they running from that danger kind of death scenes. There's a scene where a bunch of tarantulas eat a guy's face off while he screams, but he lays there and lets them do it. This is where you have to, again, embrace the idea of Nightmare Logic and just kind of let the imagery wash over you. What, Ben?
Gore fest, right?
It's gory, but it's a lot more than that, too. Then there's Terror Train, one of the last horror films Jamie Lee Curtis made, co-starring David Copperfield, and the title says it all. It's a slasher movie that takes place on a train where people are running in terror. A classic, again, and we're kind of avoiding like the go-tos, but speaking of Nightmare Logic, you have to mention Don Coscarelli's Phantasm.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely essential. Ben, do you have anything to say about that? Because I know that you're a huge Coscarelli fan.
Yeah, I am. I guess the only thing I would say to that is that there's a little bit of dream logic there too. And,
oh yeah,
like weird things are happening all the time. You just go with it, and you'll enjoy it so much more. But this film is so influential. I mean, you'll see moments in every horror movie that call back to Phantasm. It set a standard, and I know at the time every horror movie director was wanting to be like Coscarelli. Of course, he went on to make other cool movies in other genres, like Beastmaster, which is an awesome sword and sorcery movie, and actually his latest one, John Dies at the End, was pretty good too.
Oh, yeah. Right. And of course, Phantasm Ravager is getting ready to come out. And that's the fifth installment that they've been trying to get made forever. And it's not based on the Roger Avary screenplay Phantasm's End, which I actually have. And Roger Avary, of course, wrote Pulp Fiction. So
yeah,
when Roger Avary sits down to write a Phantasm movie, it's cause to be excited. But sadly, that's not the screenplay they used. I think the budget would have been something like $50 million was stuff they wanted to do. But Ravager employs parts of what was done in every screenplay. And I just want to see the giant silver ball hover and destroy office buildings. Like
that would be awesome.
Hard to see trailer right now, but I think it's about to legally drop. Luckily, I've gotten to see it, and it takes the Phantasm concept that's new and blows it completely up. It embraces a lot more of the sci-fi elements, too.
Actually, my horror book that I wrote last year that's set in the Old West has a lot of Phantasm little inside call. It was hugely influential for me in that book. I got to mention Coscarelli made Bubba Hotep. If you guys haven't seen that, you should check it out.
Bubba Hotep.
Written by Joe R. Lansdale, too.
Yeah.
So he's one of the greatest writers of genre fiction in the world. His Hap and Leonard series, his crime series, which is going to be a series on Sundance Channel soon, spearheaded by Jim Mickle, who did Stakeland and We Are What We Are.
Yep.
Oh, I love that.
Amazing. I call him the modern John Carpenter. He did Cold in July, based on one of Lansdale's books, and right then and there, they decided you're the guy to do the Hap and Leonard series. And at the Sundance before last, he got it greenlit. So that's coming. That's going to be amazing. Read Joe Lansdale. Next film, The Manitou, starring Tony Curtis and Susan Strasberg in a cheese fest about an Indian demon that grows out of a woman's back. Written by the stalwart pulp horror author Graham Masterton. Super cheesy, super laughable, yet super creepy, and it's got that weird cosmic horror thing going on too, because when they battle the demon, Susan Strasberg's hospital room turns into outer space, and suddenly they're fighting a Native American demon grown out of her back with lasers. So
I love it.
I don't know, man. I'm throwing my hands up. It is what it is, but check it out because it's a damn good time. This is something that you're going to want to drink to if you're a drinker, or get inebriated to, whatever you like to indulge in, because it's one of them movies.
I bet there's some drinking rules online you could find.
And if there's not, we're going to check, and if there's not, we're going to make a Manitou drinking game.
Nice.
The original My Bloody Valentine, Canadian production, super underrated, super moody. I actually thought the remake was pretty good too, with Tom Atkins. Mm-hmm. It's Valentine's Day, 20 years later. These kids go down into the mines where a bunch of miners were trapped and died under horrible circumstances to party. And one of the miners is still there. Mm-hmm. So great set pieces and a claustrophobic setting of being trapped in a mine while running from a killer with a pickaxe. There's one that nobody ever talks about, and that's a film called Creep from a few years ago with Fonka Potent, where she's a woman coming home from a party, gets locked in a subway system, and there's something down there with her. The premise is very simple. I don't need to say any more. It's one of those movies that's all about the execution, and she stumbles upon a long boarded up room that contains the answer to exactly what is chasing her and why. Super moody, super underrated, not that easy to find, but it did get a proper DVD release. I don't know if it's on Netflix. I don't think it is.
Yeah.
But Creep with Fonka Potent.
Not to be confused with The Creep, which is on Netflix, but that's a completely different found footage type of film.
Yeah.
Made by a friend of mine from Oakland, actually, Patrick Bryce,
Nice.
who's now killing it. And his new comedy, The Overnighter, is also highly, highly recommended. Following, getting close to the end here, Late Phases, a recent werewolf movie starring Nick D'Amici, who, if you've seen Stakeland, he's the vampire hunter in that. Nick D'Amici is one of the most awesome modern character actors. He's like a better-looking version of Charles Bronson and just as manly, with a load of sensitivity. He's also a writer by trade. He co-writes the films that he makes with Jim Mickle. Blind old vet moves into a retirement community, and it's infected with lycanthropy. Again, a simple premise, a ton of fun. But to close, one of the most important horror films ever made, from one of the most important studios to pump out horror films, Hammer Films' first foray into reimagining the classic Universal monsters, The Curse of Frankenstein, starring Peter Cushing as Victor Vaughn and Mr. Christopher Lee, otherwise known as my dad, as the monster. And the great thing about this movie is they initially wanted to use the flat-headed Jack Pierce design, but found that was actually copywritten by Universal, so they were forced to kind of do their own take on the creature, and it's absolutely terrifying looking. It looks a lot closer to a zombie kind of crossed with the Reagan design from The Exorcist.
Ooh.
That's a great point.
Lots of stitches, lots of blood, cataract eye. That's another thing. The blood in these films.
What an actual patched together human would look like to me than classic Frankenstein.
Yes, and it's torturous to look at. It looks painful.
Yeah, it's like David Lynch's Elephant Man. Like you feel bad for the creature just looking at it.
Right,
you know?
right. And it doesn't have the level of sympathy that the Karloff version does.
No.
It plays on it, but he's still an aggressive beast who is incredibly angry and wants to destroy everything. And
He's
they
scary.
don't toy with that. Yeah, and it's one of the scariest movies from the 50s, and it's also one of the first horror films of its type shot in Technicolor. So the blood in it is super vibrant. I mean, I'm a weirdo. It's like I get really picky about the viscosity and the color of blood in horror movies.
I agree.
Well, you're an effects person, Kelby.
Yeah. So that's why.
I love the cartoony blood in Dawn of the Dead, the Romero version. I think it softens the blow of the gore a little bit and brings it back to what Romero calls the Wile E. Coyote syndrome. In that Curse of Frankenstein, not so much. And this movie was rated X when it came out, and film critics wanted to attack Hammer Films for releasing such a torrid, unforgivable piece of horror trash when it came out. It was incredibly effective in that regard.
There's no swearing. There's no sex. I mean, and even the gore, it wouldn't be even PG-13 today. That's funny.
Nope.
Yeah.
But it was just too heavy for people at the time. And that's kind of what made Hammer into Hammer Studios, because before that, they weren't really doing horror movies. They were doing, love stories and stuff like that, and they were going bankrupt.
Yeah.
So they're like, hey, this is public domain. Let's toss out a horror movie and see what happens. And lo and behold, they became the main purveyors of that type of film for a good 15 years. And those movies, while dated, still hold up incredibly well and play incredibly well during the Halloween season because of their gothy nature. Safe for kids around 12 and up, I'd say.
Right.
So there you go. There's the next 20 in the Halloween 100 Horror Movie Challenge. And I guess we're done. Again, I'm Sean Smithson.
I'm Kelby Lenormand.
And I'm Ben Hodson.
And you've been listening to Movie Freak, Episode 2. And this is our launch month, so it's all about the horror through October.
Woo!
November will soften things. Romantic comedies, maybe. But until then, stay scary. Later.
Happy, happy Halloween, Halloween, Halloween. Happy, happy Halloween, silver shamrock. Happy, happy Halloween, Halloween, Halloween. Happy, happy Halloween, silver shamrock.
It's almost time, kids. The clock is ticking. Be in front of your TV sets for the Horathon. And remember the big giveaway at 9. Don't miss it. And don't forget to wear your masks. The clock is ticking. It's almost time.
Happy, happy Halloween, Halloween, Halloween. Happy, happy Halloween, silver shamrock.
Your mother's in here with his cars. Would you like to leave a message? I see that she gets it.
If that's true, then you must know my mother's maiden name. What is it?